when the Europeans were exploring north, they went into Lapland, which is basically like where Eskimos live, except European Eskimos instead of North American Eskimos. Essentially the same kind of culture, really far north. Now, when they encountered the Laplanders, they found that there were many customs that were different. In particular, one of the things that they noticed was when mom and dad got old, rather than taking care of them, reducing their workload, listening to their stories, doing the sorts of things that the Europeans thought you should do with old mom and dad, what the Laplanders did was they'd take mom and dad out a long way from the village, give them a little bit of water, and leave them there to die. And they came home and said, the Laplanders have a very different moral code than we do. They have different moral beliefs. Their moral claims are different. First of all, they started out saying they have no respect for human life. They don't have any reverence for their parents. They don't honor their fathers and mothers the way they should. They don't respect human life to the extent that we do. Rachel's makes essentially the same point with infanticide, with a different culture. Says, look, this seems to be a dramatic difference in moral codes. We say value life and respect your father and mother. They say get rid of them when they're inconvenient. And no respect for their parents. There seems to be a difference in the moral code, a difference in what moral claims this culture made and that culture made. That then led to some people saying, well, now we need to be tolerant. We need to understand these differences in context, and we need to not rush to judge. That's the way they do it here. This is the way we do it here. This is just differences in opinion. Mom and dad aren't kicking and screaming and pissed off. In fact, they have a little party. You know, it's time for mom to die now. And a little party. Then they go out into the wilderness to die. Everybody understands that's how it works, and that's, according to the relativist, all there is to it. Here, mom and dad sit in the nursing home. There, mom and dad sit on the ice floe. Here, they die gradually after several years. There, they die pretty quick. No substantial, real big issue here. It's not that they're doing it wrong or we're doing it right. It's just difference. They do it their way, we do it our way. That led towards relativism. That's the sort of cultural difference that led towards relativism. It appears on the surface that there's a dramatic difference in the moral code from the one culture to the other. Now, actually, if you look a little more carefully, it turns out there's not so much disagreement in the moral code as it appears. Relativism said moral codes are completely different. There's a substantial difference in moral code here, and each culture is right. But it turns out, actually, if you investigate it a little more carefully, the Laplanders and the Europeans don't actually disagree about a matter of moral truth. They disagree about some other non-moral facts. They have the same values, in essence. They just differ about what the world is like. Both cultures respect their parents. Both cultures are trying to do the best they can for their parents. Both cultures are trying to most make their parents' lives happy and good. It turns out the moral claims are pretty much the same in the Laplander culture and the European culture. But they differ about what happens after you die. Here's my best summing up of what we, or European descended peoples, seem to think about what happens after you die. Several options, all of which lead to basically the same kind of behavior. One, nothing. You die and that's it. It's over. That seems to be one of the things lots of Judeo-Christian culture types believe. Another, you go to hell. Another, you go to heaven, and you get to start all over clean and fresh. Now, suppose any one of those things is true. Then there's an incentive to stay alive as long as possible. Stick around here. If there's nothing afterwards, this is it, so you live it as long as possible. Keep mom and dad alive as long as possible. Help them to live out their natural lifespan as long as they can in as much comfort as possible. If they're going to go to hell afterwards, that's an unpleasant place to be, so put that off as long as possible. Stay alive as long as you can. If you go to heaven afterwards, most people in the Judeo-Christian traditions, the cultures that were influenced by those traditions, believe that Either you get a brand new body, or you don't have a body at all, or your body is regenerated and made new. So heaven's a nice, happy place to be, no matter what you're like when you die. The Laplanders believe something very different. They believe that after you die, you wake up in the beyond, or the happy hunting grounds, or whatever, the other side, in the same body you died in. So, you have to go through eternity in the same shape you're in when you die. So that's the sort of, bury them with the stuff they'll need kind of tradition. If your mom has arthritis and no teeth and can barely see when she dies, her afterlife is going to really suck. If she's got to go through all of eternity, arthritic, no teeth, no sight, all of eternity is going to suck. So, you want to make sure she dies before that, in a useful body, a body worth having. So it turns out it's actually respectful. It's actually doing your best for. It's actually looking out for the interests of mom to make sure she dies while she's still relatively young. Not maybe 20, but, not 116 either. So it's a difference of a non-moral fact that leads to this apparent difference of moral codes. That's an important thing to point out because people automatically assume that there's a dramatic difference from culture to culture in what the moral beliefs are. And yet, you often have to be more careful to figure out, well, what's a moral belief and what's not a moral belief? It looks like there's a difference in whether we respect the elderly or not. Turns out that's not the difference. The difference is actually what happens after you die. That's not a moral fact. That's some other kind of fact. A religious fact or a non-moral fact of some kind. So where is exactly the disagreement is hard to find right away. Also, the differences are often exaggerated. I said, I believe, and if I didn't, I'll repeat it. Well, if I didn't say it, I'll say it. If I did say it, I'll repeat it. There's not as much disagreement as it might appear. There